Today, I have Denyse O'Leary and David Kitz as my guests. When and where did this group start?
Well, I really started, I would say, in 2013. I had retired from teaching just the previous year, and was looking for something to occupy some of my time. So, and for a number of years, because I'd been doing writing, I had a number of books published already. I thought it would be, I really saw a need, to be honest with you, for a group like this, because often I met writers who needed a little encouragement, or needed even just some information about how to proceed further, because often it's not an easy role, being an author or a writer. You've got a lot to learn, and because I guess I, through a series of sometimes blunders, sometimes successes, I had some, a measure of success, or got some things published, got some things off the ground. I thought it would be really good to help others do the same. So that's why I started the group.
And how did Denyse and yourself connect?
Well, the group was, I think, in 2013, meeting at Salem Bookstore.
Right, yes.
We met in the chapel, I think one Saturday a month. But then Salem was no longer able to host us. And I said to David, well, what about meeting at my place? It so happened that I live in a townhouse where the main floor is all just one big room. So I said, we could meet at my place, but somehow or other, a group of people wanted to do more than that, so we thought, why don't we put on a conference? And David, being very well connected, was able to get us free space. And then, I don't know, what was it, 70 people came to our conference?
I think, well, the first one was about 50.
Okay, 50.
Yeah, and so that would have been 2015 was our first annual conference.
Mm-hmm,
Okay,
mm-hmm.
But it really, I think, that particular first conference really showed us that there was an interest, and that there was real possibilities, or a community, you might say, of writers or potential writers existed here in the National Capital area. And so it ended up being, I think, a real encouragement to us to persist and grow it to 70 and so on. So I think that I would call that kind of there were various what I would call God moments when you thought, okay, I think we've done something right here, and we have to give our Lord credit for that, because I think He's helped us along the way.
Now, when you first met, you met in the chapel, correct? What was that first meeting? What was the activity that you were sharing prior to the conference?
Well, one of the things we were doing, I think I would call it more or less, you could call it an encouragement group, or even an accountability, writer, prayer and accountability group.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I really value is if I say I'm going to write something or do something, I think it's helpful for me to share that with someone else,
yes,
and then meet with them, and have to report back, well, how did that go?
Okay.
And I guess the other point we would do is we would pray for one another. Okay, well, you're working on this project, I'm working on this. We'll pray for one another.
Yes.
And hopefully that adds a bit of more impetus to getting your project done.
Who were some of the first original members of the group?
Well, one of them would be, that immediately springs to mind, is Jenny Byrne.
Yes, yes, and she subsequently offered us instruction in writing for children,
Right.
because she actually works with children, and through her we found people who write for children on a professional basis, and another one, remember, was Mary
Yes,
Haskett.
Mary Haskett, yeah.
We started the critique groups because Mary Haskett, who moved to Ottawa, had a critique group going for a decade in London, Ontario. So as soon as she came, and I knew this anyway because I'm from Toronto, and she came there, I said, well, please, let's start the critique group. Now, she wasn't able to continue it indefinitely, but we retained the idea of having a critique group.
Denyse, may I ask you, for those that are unaware, what is a critique group and what's its value to the writer?
The writer brings something that he or she is working on, reads it to the other writers in the group, and gets feedback. It's recommended to bring something about which you yourself have questions, because so many of the things that we think we're struggling with alone actually even have names. In the writing trade, so to speak. Someone might say, you have a problem with your backstory, meaning the things that happen to the characters before the story opens. So let's talk about, how to alter the backstory a bit so that the confrontation in the story makes more sense. Okay. So that's just an example, but so people get some help, including from professional writers or people who have published books. It's a great opportunity. We added workshops as well. Did we start adding workshops in 2015?
Yeah, I think that fall we did. Yeah, so we had our major conference, in the spring, and then I think we had our first workshop that fall, and then we've had ones ever since. One in the fall always, and one in January typically.
So it sounds like this evolution of events available. How did you promote these events to make the writers aware of this possibility?
Well, one of the first or simplest ways was simply email contact. So we established an email list of those who participated or want to participate, and so there's a list of people, okay, that we use, keep in touch thereby, use that to inform them of upcoming events. We've used CHRI, the radio station, as promoted our events, sometimes through paid advertising, but usually just through their calendar of events, the events calendar. What else have we done? We have our own website, ottawachristianwriters.ca. That sometimes new people will find us through that. We have a Facebook page. And so those sort of things have gradually developed over time, and I think by having those things, you can get that sense of community, or be involved as much as you're able to be involved, because I think we all lead busy lives, but I think it's that that need to connect.
Now, in the beginning, I mentioned there were a lot of different activities. It's evolved over time. Please add.
Well, the book discussion group got started last year, didn't it?
Yes. I thought, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes. Well, you kind of got it going yourself. That we meet at a bookstore to discuss a work. If we can, it would be a work of a local Christian author.
Yes.
But sometimes it's just been a book that a number of people have been reading that's of interest to Christians. And then, in addition to that, another thing that Nicole started, which I think is really valuable, is a book review committee where we encourage people to read books and write reviews. One problem that many Christian writers face is they're isolated. They think only important people, established writers, People with real talent are doing this stuff. And one of the things I like to say to people is there are probably at least 500,000 people in North America who make their living in whole or in part from writing. Now, this is a wide variety of things that people might write. Not necessarily novels or poetry or anything. It could be advertising copy, fundraising letters, sermons, devotionals, slogans, whatever, write-ups, biographies, even, epitaphs, speeches for politicians. Okay, I'm going on, but my point is there are so many ways you can use the skill of writing that people who are sitting there isolated wondering, would anybody want me? I always want to say, well, not if you're just sitting there. Start by offering to edit your church's newsletter or write a review of a local book by a Christian author and get it put up at Amazon or Goodreads. In other words, get in.
Yes.
Be one of those people, and you'd be surprised. Most people are happy to have someone helping out.
Yes.
And most book discussion groups want people to come and discuss the book.
Well, one of the things that has always fascinated me is I think the quality of people that we have here in Ottawa. Okay,
Sure.
And I'm looking at one of them, Denyse, who's really worked for. Basically her entire life in the writing field.
That's right.
And so I think when she moved from Toronto here, I personally felt really blessed to have her on board because she's got this vast amount of experience that I think that we can tap into. And I think that's really part of the whole value of being in a group like this, is you can tap into the expertise that various people have, and that of course can help you elevate your own writing.
Yes.
So I find that's invaluable, and that's why I think a group like this, with the various people who bring their different talents and their abilities, and their questions, because that's why we're here, to help one another. It's not just about promoting ourselves, but we want to be helping ourselves as a community of Christian writers to up our game, to do better, to produce better material.
Please go ahead.
One real advantage of Ottawa is that it tends to attract people from across Canada.
Yes.
Now, if we were trying to do exactly the same thing in Saskatoon, it would be a little harder. Notice I said exactly the same thing. There's lots of good things you can do for writing in Saskatoon. But just for example, John West and David Kilgore.
Yeah, John Weston. Yeah.
Both retired members of Parliament have been able to speak to our meetings. And Don Hutchinson. Yes. Okay. He's been able to speak to us and MC events and things like that, which are of great value, because we can get people to come out of hibernation when we say, yes, but these people will be there. Yeah.
Okay.
Janet at Buckingham.
Yes.
It's great points, great points.
Right.
So each area will have different resources available based on the location, like these people that you've just mentioned. Yes.
Well, and we didn't mention the fundraising.
Please.
Well, David Kilgore, just for example, what I mean by that, he's a retired MP, and he lets us use his very fine home in Rockcliffe once a year for a gala, the idea of which is give a tax deductible donation to the Word Guild, and the money comes back to us to put on our conference. So, and we have entertainment as well as a spread and a lot of fun and prizes. This year we gave out books written by Canadian Christians as prizes. We got a whole box of them from Essence, and they were quite good books. And it worked really well. We've always been able to raise money that way. One important thing is to keep the costs of our conference down. We try to do it for about $50 or $60 a year, because most people who are just starting out as writers, besides being bashful, feel discouraged. $50 or $60 is next to nothing for a full-day conference with a lunch. Let's face it. Where else can you go to get a deal like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the fundraising event, then we put on the conference. We pay a small honorarium to the speakers at the conference, because, again, these are Christian writers we're trying to encourage. We want them to know that we value what they're doing. And but the basic issue here for me is a person has to explain to their family, well, I want to go to this conference on Saturday. It helps to be able to say it's only $60 for the day, as opposed to $300 for the day, which, the conference I was at in October was $1,900 for 3 days.
Wow.
Now, mind you, it was in the States, in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
But those are typical conference rates.
Yes.
But our people couldn't, you've never had a book published and you want to spend that kind of money on a conference?
I hear you.
Okay, so we don't do it that way. We say, come one, come all. We even will find a way to make someone afford it who doesn't actually have the money, because we can often touch somebody who's had a good year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Well, thank you. When you look at all the span of years that have passed, what personal contributions do you feel personally that you've invested in the Ottawa Christian Writers Fellowship?
Well, I think one of the things, I go back to maybe and I'm forgetting a name here, okay, but I remember, and maybe the name doesn't matter, okay, in the sense that I remember that first or second year we were together, there was a young writer, female writer. She wanted to write this book, single parent, and really in many ways struggling, but she would come every month faithfully, and sometimes with a tale of woe, so to speak, of the difficulties she's facing, but also wanting to get this book that she had in mind, this novel, eventually published, and eventually it happened. Okay, and I think stories like that, where you know that you've helped someone along their way, okay, that they maybe didn't have the courage to try this, and or the persistence. They needed that little bit of a nudge to move them along. And when you know that you've been part of that team, and usually we work as a team. I don't want to take all the credit for anything, because it's I'm not sure it was necessarily my words. Maybe it was someone else at the table who really spoke the words that she needed that day. Okay, I think it's those things where you've been able to help someone along on their writing journey. That's what makes a difference.
Are there any comments on that as well?
That's my favorite thing too. I've been a mentor to writers over the years. I was 30-some years an editor as well as a writer. And one of the things that happens, it feels amusing to me, but I hope a good way. You work with a person, they the first thing that happens is they think the question is whether they have talent or not. No, the question is, do you have contacts or not? Mm-hmm. Having worked in the industry, I know perfectly well that when editors are looking around for somebody to write, they're not wondering who has the most talent in Canada. They're wondering, who can we get started on this job on Thursday? Mm-hmm. That's what they're actually wondering. Mm-hmm. Because they want to say to the boss editor, we got somebody working on this, she's starting Thursday. Mm-hmm. That's what they want. Okay, be that person and you're hired. Mm-hmm. Do you have talent? Well, you'll find out. Mm-hmm. Chances are you've got enough talent for what they want, because they have every incentive to make you succeed. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the first thing, is get over the idea that it's a question of whether you have talent. Get out there, meet people, make contacts. To overuse an already overused expression, if it's not what you know, But who you know, get out there and meet the people you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, anyway, that was one thing. The other thing is then, they'll do this. Some of them will do this. And then one day I get a phone call and the person will say, "You're never going to believe this, Denyse. Try me. They accepted my article." Oh. No, I don't say this, but naturally I'm thinking 30,000 articles probably got accepted across North America today. But I don't say that. I say that's wonderful, and I bet your next one will get accepted too if you follow the right steps.
Mm-hmm.
And call me if there's any problem, we'll discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, they don't need to call me anymore. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That that's the most rewarding thing, when the person is astonished that they finally followed the usual steps and they got published.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Instead
that
of
breakthrough happened in
Yeah.
some way.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And now, again, one of the things I learned is the reason a lot of people don't get published has nothing to do with talent, it's just they're doing it wrong. They're going about it wrong.
Okay.
So,
What is the value and the benefit of being connected?
To the Word Guild.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think I always feel I get benefit from being part of a larger body, okay, of Canadian Christian writers, okay? So, I mean, if I get benefit on the local scene through my fellowship and interaction with the Christian writers here in Ottawa, why wouldn't I appreciate that on a national scale as well? Of course I would, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think the other thing, I mean, we have the national our usual conference every year in June, and the gala with the awards, an awards gala as well for the best in Canadian Christian writing. And so having an organization that does these awards and the conference, which every time I've gone to one of these, it's been just a huge blessing. I can't begin to describe how built up and encouraged I've been through that. And in some cases, you know, I mean, right now I have an agent because I met that agent or made the contact at the convention, okay, a literary agent. I've got a book published because I met with a publisher, acquisition editor at the Word Guild conference. These are what I would call successes that have simply come directly. There's no secret here. You said it, Denyse. It's getting out there and meeting the people and connecting with the right people. And when you do that, things begin to happen. And so, why would I want to be part of the Word Guild? Why wouldn't I? You know, I absolutely find it, to me, it's been something that has absolutely enlivened and just given me so much, the connections, but beyond the connections, just the encouragement of knowing other writers, seeing some of their struggles are my struggles too, and finding out how they've solved some of those problems. I just find it really, really encouraging.
I, as you know, lived in Toronto for about 48 years and was a founding member of the Word Guild and often taught at the conferences as well as benefiting from sitting in other workshops. The thing about it is you get a range of writers, very experienced ones, multi-published, people who are working on their first book, young people who are just sort of learning the ropes. So it's such a large mix that people are bound to find that what they thought was unusual is not. You know, someone will say, well, my husband thinks writing is a waste of time because I haven't published a book yet. And then, of course, three or four other people who are husbands or wives will look up with recognition. Okay, how do we handle this, right? You believe that you have what it takes. How do you sell your family on the idea? It's those kinds of conversations, often taking place outside of workshops,
Yes.
are also important.
Yes.
You discover that it's not a new problem, and great writers have struggled with it.
Yes.
People. I mean, it's not like getting a job at the bakery, where you know what you're going to bring home by way of a paycheck at the end of the week if you don't get fired. It's not like that. You don't know what's going to happen. You only know, here's what you can know. You follow the best procedures, get to know the people who can help you, benefit from their advice, keep plugging at it. Do not belong to 6 committees at the church. That's another thing I often used to say to people. One thing you cannot be if you're a writer is a social butterfly. You have to be somebody who would only be on 1 or 2 focused committees at the church, but the rest of your evenings that you have some free time in, you're writing.
Yeah.
And that's the real test,
Yeah.
by the way. The real test isn't, do I have talent? Who knows? If you don't write anything, there's no way you can tell.
Yep.
You produce a body of work that other people can look at, and they can tell you if you're doing something that's good.
That's right.
And something else, well, you know what? There's a better way of handling this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like tennis. You want to get better at tennis? Play tennis.
That's right. And interact with other tennis players.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't you interact with other writers?
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
That's how you get better.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for sharing your insights, your experiences, and the history of the Ottawa Christian Writers Fellowship, with a combination of the interests of the local people and the contribution of the organizers. The Ottawa Christian Writers Fellowship continues providing opportunities, helping Christian writers to develop in their craft of writing.